Hey, thanks for joining me. So for the last month or so, I've been using this lens from TT Artisan. It's their 23mm f1.4. They sent me this lens so I could take a look at it, and I've really enjoyed using it. You know, when I asked them to send me this, I had looked at several of their lenses, and I read some reviews or watched some reviews on this lens and looked at the specs and decided on this one mainly because I wanted something that would kind of fill the hole of a lens that, represents a normal lens on micro four thirds, but is relatively fast. And this lens has absolutely filled that void. So when I got this lens and looked at it and looked at the design of it, I was curious about what their thinking was when they designed it. So I actually emailed TT Artisan and I asked them, to tell me what their engineers were tasked with, what was their goal when they designed this lens. And the answer I got back, of course, this is their marketing department, not the engineers, but the answer I got back was that they were trying to design a lens that had a vintage look on the outside and optically or image-wise created, vintage looking images. They wanted a vintage vibe for the whole lens. And I think they've succeeded significantly. And like I said, this really fills a hole for me. As a micro four thirds shooter, I love vintage lenses, but the thing that I can't really fill is a normal lens that's fast. I mean, I could find a 24mm f2 lens from somebody. It'd probably be quite a bit bigger and longer, and then I have to put an adapter on it, and the whole thing gets kind of big. And on micro four thirds cameras, I don't want a great big lens on my small cameras. So the size of this is just fantastic. So the design of this lens outwardly, of course, looks very vintage. It's got this zebra focusing ring. The shape of it is very much like a vintage lens. Optically, it's a design that's really kind of unusual. So you notice, if I can make a reflection show it, the front element on this is not concave or convex, domed. It's concave. It's dished inward. You can kind of see that on the reflection. So the front element is actually dished in. And there's really only a couple of lenses that historically, there's only a few that have been designed this way. The one most commonly thought of is the 50mm Zeiss Ultron, which has a dished-in element. Canon made a couple of lenses that way. I think one of their 35mm fast lenses in their FD line is dished like that. But it's not a common design. And while the optical design of this is not a recreation of the Ultron, it's not a copy of it. You can definitely see the connective tissue when you look at the two designs. And so this 23mm, which should be a 46mm equivalent on micro four thirds, or a 35mm equivalent on an APS-C sensor. Maximum aperture f1.4, stops down to f16. It's got clicks on the aperture ring. There are half clicks in between some of those that are spaced a little further out, and then as you get down here, it goes to single clicks. And it, like they've done on some other lenses, this actually skips from 8 to 16. So I can get this to focus on it. There's 8, there's 16. So if you want f11, you kind of have to interpret what's in between. At that point, the movement is just so small that that's the way they did it. They just skipped from 8 to 16. But still, in a micro four thirds, I'm probably not going to shoot this stop down past f8 because you start hitting diffraction limiting when you do that. So anyway, it's got 10 aperture blades, which are curved, so you get a nice round aperture even as you stop down. So your out of focus highlights, even if you stop down a little bit, don't turn into hexagons or something. They're nice and round. 43mm filter thread. There are 8 elements in 7 groups in this lens, 3 of which are high refractive index elements, and 1 is low dispersion. And like I say, it's got this concave front element, which is kind of unique. The lens, like I say, definitely has a vintage look on the outside, and the images it creates definitely have a vintage vibe. They're, wide open. It's nice and sharp in the center. Some of the complaints I saw from people that reviewed this on APS-C cameras is that they wished it was a little sharper at the edges. I didn't really, on micro four thirds, of course, we're cropping out some of the edges compared to APS-C. So on micro four thirds, it was nice and sharp, really out to the edges, even wide open. It does get a little softer, but not really that much. And as you stop it down just a stop or two, and it gets nice and sharp all the way across. And it is very sharp. It's a excellent lens in that regard. Beautiful color rendition on the lens. The one thing that really differentiates this, actually there's two things that differentiates this from a vintage lens, is that this is multi-coated, so the images have better contrast than you would typically see from a vintage lens. And the other thing that differentiates it is that being a new lens, it's not going to have haze or fungus or dust inside of it. It's not going to have dried up grease in the focusing mechanism. So you skip all that. And, you know, the benefit optically is that your images have better contrast. So it really nice lens to use. Very affordable. When I looked on their website this morning, I think it was $114 for this lens. I'll put a link in the description down below. You can order it direct from our TT Artisan. I forgot to ask them for a lens hood to come with it. They do sell one. I had a 43mm lens hood in all my stuff that I'd purchased from Amazon, I don't know, sometime back. And so I've just been using this hood on it, and it's one of those vented rangefinder style hoods, so it kind of has that vintage look to it anyway, which is kind of cool. But you know, if I walked up on somebody and they were using this lens on their mirrorless camera, I would pretty much assume they were using a vintage lens. It definitely has that look, and the cool thing is it delivers that kind of imagery. And so I'm really loving this. I've longed for a lens that would fall into the normal focal length range, that was fast, that, you know, that would be fun to use, and this one really has been a pleasure to use. So I went with this lens a couple weekends ago to the Myriad Botanical Gardens. They have flowers, all kinds of stuff outside, but they have this big round greenhouse. It's a huge thing. I'm gonna call it a tube, but it's this big round tube-shaped greenhouse, and you have to pay to go in, but you go inside and there's all kinds of stuff inside, and decorations and plants, and mostly tropical kind of plants. But one of my oldest son and his family, one of my granddaughters was in town the other weekend, and they wanted to go, so we went there, my wife and I and his family, and so I took a bunch of pictures inside. I've taken some pictures outside there. Really enjoyed using the lens. Like I say, the close focusing down to, you know, 0.2 of a meter was really nice. The focus throw on this, if I grab it and turn it from infinity to close, is just right at 90 degrees. So it snaps in and out of focus really nicely. I didn't have any trouble with, you know, feeling the clicks in the aperture ring. They are pretty subtle, but I could feel them. I don't really count clicks typically, though. I just look down at the aperture ring. And the shape of the two rings, this one is knurled pretty deeply, and then the zebra-shaped focusing rings, I had no trouble feeling the difference between those two. I didn't ever get them mixed up. So I just really enjoyed using this. It's been just a lot of fun. And it's delivered the kind of image quality that I would like to get from a vintage lens, even though it's not vintage. So let's take a look at some of these pictures. You can kind of see what you think. I took a ton of pictures. I'm going to have to cull them down to something I can actually fit in this video. But let's take a look at the pictures, and I'll catch up with you afterwards. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing some of those images. I've really enjoyed using this lens. It has really filled kind of a hole for me in terms of a lens that approximates a normal lens for micro four thirds, but is still fast. Beautiful image quality. I'm really just loving this. It's definitely staying in my camera bag with my cameras. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed seeing those. If you have any questions or thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. Don't hesitate to leave me a comment. And as always, thanks for watching.